Hello everybody, this is Manu-S and welcome to the first post the fall of Argentport Eternal Top Decks deck tech series for EternalTitans.com. So the reviews are wrapped up, so it's time to dive into the first deck tech with the new set. So let's get started. Okay, so this is the TJP spell-based aggro tempo deck. I just called it Alessi Aggro, but you can call it whatever you want. There's a whole bunch of names floating around. Mouche just won the ETS with a slightly older list to this. I gave him my 80, didn't play ETS myself, like a lot of the time. I just give him my deck lists and he top 8s with them. And this time he didn't just top 8, he won finally after so many quarterfinal and some semi-final losses, so congrats to him again. But yeah, let's take a look at the deck. So first off, we have 23 units, 4 of each of the 1 to 3 drops, and 3 Crownwatch Press Gang. The Alessis, Students, Disciples, and Battlemages are your main threats, and every list will run them. Same goes for Xenan Merchant, but instead of being a threat, it's mostly about utility, consistency, and flexibility, while also providing a decent body, having additional Aegis units in a deck with cards like Accelerated Evolution and units that potentially die to Hailstorm and stuff like that is very valuable. And it provides a lot of utility with the market that I will talk about later. But the thing that not everyone has and everyone agrees on are the press gangs. Some people run Geomar, some people run Mirror Image or Enforcers, or don't even run any additional units at all other than the 20 that I just mentioned. So I want to talk a bit about press gang. The main reason that made me build my version of this deck and mess around with it was Edayama's Combrano Moment deck with Alessi and Crownwatch, which was probably the first Alessi deck overall that did reasonably well and looked like a real deck. And I really liked this combination and didn't quite think about that before. So Edayama inspired me to think about what else and what best could be done with Crownwatch Press Gang plus Alessi. So I turned towards this after messing around with the straight Horu version of the Gift of Battle spell-based proactive decks. The thing why I think Press Gang is the best additional unit, best 4-drop for the deck, and the deck also wants more units, is the deck has the issue of not having unit or not sticking a unit. That's like one of the big issues, the biggest issues of the deck, because you have a lot of spells and you need at least one unit in play, and a lot of your units don't have protection from removal, or in case of Xenan Merchant, while having protection from removal, are not that threatening and that good at winning the game on their own. Even if you fetch, say, an Evolution, it's still only like a 5/4 flying Aegis Endurance. That's not impossible to deal with or impossible to just stall. So, and also costs you 7 power, so that's a lot. So the best way to make sure that your opening hands and your games in general are supplied by enough units is running press gang, since when you're winning, when you're doing well and your units are sticking, it doesn't matter what your 4-drop is, whether it's Geomar or press gang or whatever, you're winning anyway. But if you're struggling to stick a unit on board and actually establish an offense, Press Gang is probably the best card you can draw, since it provides 2 units, and when it dies, provides up to 2 more units. So it provides a lot of value, makes it near impossible for any removal-heavy deck to run you out of threats once you draw 1 Press Gang. And in the fair share of games, especially in these games where your opponent is just killing all your stuff, you might not even play any spells until like turn 5. So getting these Alessis means you still have a lot of spells in your hand to make them grow, which is really great. And if your Press Gang gets buffed by Evolutions or Sharpened Reflexes or Stand-Togethers, it's also really nice, because then when they come back with Revenge, they still have that buff and are an even better free unit. So yeah, I think Press Gang basically patches up one of your biggest weaknesses pretty well, and is basically the best card in the deck when you're struggling, and when you're like doing well, it doesn't matter what the slot would be. So just consider committing a slot to your weaknesses and to situations when you're doing poorly, because the deck is already really good at doing well when it can stick threats, and then you don't need something like Guioma or whatever, which still would just potentially die in the flurry of removal of decks like Removal Pile and stuff like that. So that's the main reason for Press Gang, and also consistently having Alessi is also really powerful because she's really strong, can grow really quickly and take over the board a lot, and is also very cheap, allowing you to play units and stand together in the same turn, for example. Okay, we cut the force Press Gang basically because it can be a bit clunky and drawing multiples is not that desirable. So Mouche suggested potentially shaving one, and I like that thought, so we cut down on one. Next we have a whole lot of spells. A lot of these are pretty standard. For Finest Hour is self-explanatory. It's the cheapest, best spell for this type of deck to protect your units, make your units win in combat, and also just provide burst with Berserk or double damage or both. Gift of Battle is your other burst card, provides a lot of burst damage with units like Battlemage, Student, and Alessi, and quadruple damage basically with Disciple, which is the fastest kill. Giving Berserk to Rilgon's Disciple and pumping it can end the game very, very quickly. If you have a Finest Hour and a Gift of Battle on a Rilgon, that's already 20 damage on turn 3, just from one unit attacking. That is super powerful. So if you add in a Sharpened Reflex or half an Evolution, we're already talking 24 damage in one turn. So there are some really nutty turn 3 kills this deck can have if left unchecked. For Gift might not necessarily be the perfect number, since the card is a bit situational and a bit weak on its own, so it is possible that there should be 3. What I would not recommend, what I see a lot of people do, is run 3 main and 1 in the market. I just don't think it's good enough of a market slot. You really want to get it. You want to use your merchants mostly to either get evolution, an additional threat if you light on threats with mirror image, or just use your merchants for utility to deal with problems. So Gift has just not been something that I would want to merchant for usually, which is why I don't like to waste a market slot on it. So I wouldn't recommend that. Either just run 3 and none in the market, or all 4 main. Then we have Levitate. This is just kind of a nice all-rounder and fluff card. Most lists run it, but not everyone, I think. I was messing around with and without it, but I think the deck is just a bit better without it. With it. It allows you to fly over randomly for free damage with your bigger units, especially Disciple. It makes your deck thinner, gives you some more velocity, gives you more free spells to grow your Alessi, or simply activate Disciple or Battlemage. The flying is good on offense and defense. The fact that it's free lets you pop Aegis for free if you have to get rid of an opposing Aegis unit. There's just a lot of things this can do, really. And so it's basically never dead on and never bad. Just a great card to have if your deck benefits from cheap spells. Then we have 2 sharpened reflexes. Started with 4. Card is a bit hit or miss. The fact that the buff is permanent is really nice and can come in very handy, but it is not always enough to win combat, and it's also not that much damage burst, so running too many can be a bit lackluster if you draw multiples. So that's why there's 2, plus you can only fit so many. Then we have the Accelerated Evolution. That's one of the cards that makes the deck so powerful and hard to stop, because providing either endurance for offense defense against more aggressive faster decks, or just providing flying to fly over big blockers is just really, really powerful while being a spell at the same time to trigger all the spell synergies and buffing the units at the same time. It's just amazing. So yeah, run as many as you can, which are 3 main and 1 in the market for Merchant. One of the premium generic cards. Like if I want a generic enhancer, I'll always go for Evolution over Gift basically. The cases where Gift is better are very rare. Also keep in mind the fact that it has Echo makes it for a nice card to use your Merchant on. Like if you have nothing else you want to get rid of, you can always just get rid of half an Evolution to turn it into a full card again. Or even just into 2 copies of Evolution. I've done that plenty of times. Then we have Equivocate, just basically a nice tempo play that is ultra flexible because it can target anything, even your own stuff, to protect it from removal against control that doesn't have other good targets for something that would be an actual removal. So that's another nice plus. And yeah, 3 main because there's a 4th in the market because it's so flexible at dealing with whatever you need to deal with. Then we have 2 Xenan Initiation. Mouche still had the Vanquishers, which are a bit better across the board, I would say, but fairly weak in the mirror, which is a pretty big concern right now. And Kamado is running Initiations in his list. And while I'm really not a big fan of the card in general, since it's fairly poor in a lot of matchups, especially against other mid-range decks, it is really good in the mirror and arguably a bit better against aggro than Vanquish as well. But Vanquish is better than people think because there's a lot of like weapons and buffs, warcries going on, so that against both Stone Scar and Skycrack you usually have enough Vanquish targets for Vanquish to be pretty good. But yeah, Initiation is just very good in the mirror because it allows you to early on take out their units. Like you can sometimes have like a turn 1 Alessi, they play their Disciple, pass, you just Initiation your Alessi and kill that Disciple, stuff like that. That's such a huge swing, so that's why I want to try it. I haven't played a ton with it, but yeah, if you don't like it or run into a lot of big guys instead of mirrors, just play Vanquishes again. What I cannot really recommend is running Permafrost, both because it's not a spell and because it's so bad in the mirror and so bad at dealing with a bunch of other annoying units like Icaria, Titan, and Tavrot, and Equivocate is not always enough for that. Sure, Icaria is slow and stuff, but these decks have a lot of removal, so they might slow you down enough to get the Icarias out, so being able to deal with them can be pretty relevant. And then last but not least, we have to Stand Together. The card can be really powerful, but it's also extremely clunky. Most of the units cost too much to play them in the same turn as Stand Together, so you need to stick units first, and you need to stick more than 1 unit for Stand Together to be worth it, preferably 2 non-Aegis units. So as you can already see, there's a lot of things that need to go well for Stand Together. I would not recommend more than 3 at most. Ahorn has been advocating for 4, but I think this is very terrible. The card is way too situational and clunky. But that's another thing that I like about Press Gang. Press Gang makes Stand Together a bit better, since if you play your Press Gang on 4, get an Alessi, you have the Press Gang out, people often don't want to like aggressively deal with your Press Gang because it has revenge, and they rather just want to like ignore it if they can. So you almost always get to your 5th turn with your Press Gang out, maybe even another unit that you had out, like something with Aegis maybe, and then you just play your Alessi and play Stand Together, and suddenly you hit 2 to 3 units with Stand Together. Your Alessi is already a 3/3 Aegis, and your Press Gang is a 4/4 Aegis Revenge that will come back for free, and that's a really powerful line. That's part of what I like it for, and it's a nice situational blowout against Sweeper and some spot removal, so it's a nice card to have, but not essential. And then we have 25 power plus 3 Seek power, so 28 power. Seek is particularly nice here because it's a spell that buffs and triggers our spell synergies, while also fixing all 3 colors at the same time. The influence of the deck right now is 20, 16, 16, which is fine. The 16 for time is the minimum I would recommend for 1 and 2 drops in time. 17 wouldn't hurt, but isn't necessary. And yeah, Primal should be around 15 to 16 at least, since yeah, you usually won't need Primal before turn 3, and it's also not always super essential. The deck can sometimes do fine for a couple turns with Combrei colors. And yeah, Justice you want at least 20 because you have a double Justice 3-drop that's pretty relevant to hit on curve, so I wouldn't go below that, but I think the cost of running more Justice is just too high, since I, for example, don't want the 29th power, the 4 Seek, since the deck just doesn't make enough use of it and has a tendency to flood out too much, especially with unselective cantrips like Levitate and some Scout from Sharpened Reflexes and stuff. So, and like the Crest. So yeah, that's the thing with the power base. What I changed since Mouche's ETS win is Kamado and Sunnyvale have been yeah, telling me how much they like Crownwatch standard in the deck. I see why it is nice and all. The problem is I think it's pretty ambitious to run standards in a 3-faction deck like this, but ultimately I like the idea of having a lifesteal for the mirror. That's the main reason why I wanted to give standard a try, since you need more ways to swing the mirror and kind of come back in the mirror when you start behind. The mirror is very uninteractive and very swingy. There's not a lot of good removal for the mirror. Blocking is extremely risky because of the tick, so you can almost never block. So it's all about racing and getting ahead on board, and having a massive lifesteal attack with a double damage or berserk unit is a great way to swing a race in your favor. So ultimately I yeah, decided that they might be right, and the mirror is the main reason to make me come around on the standard, basically, since otherwise I think the deck doesn't need it. But yeah, you need to get every edge that you can for the mirror, hence the initiation and the standard inclusions. I basically cut 2 crests, or like 1 crest and a banner to fit 2 standards, bringing us to 6 depleted sources plus 3 Seeks, so almost 9 actual depleted power sources, which is the utmost maximum I want to run in a deck like this, really. But I don't really want to run less crests, since they help the deck with not flooding or screwing too much, make it overall more consistent, and the deck doesn't have any real turn 1 plays either, so having the Crest turn 1 is very nice, and you can also sometimes play Crest plus Seek in the same turn to play 2 depleted sources in 1 turn, and ideally you don't even want to use standard as power if you can avoid it, and just use it as a spell later on. So I think this is like the maximum you can afford, really. And yeah, I basically cut a Primal and a Time Source from 17 to 16 to have less duels and afford the Crownwatch standards while still maintaining the 20 minimum Justice sources that I wanted. But yeah, basically if you feel like the power base is too slow, either cut the standards or replace some of the crests with more banners or seats to make the power base less slow, since you can only cram so much depleted value in your power base ultimately. And last but not least, I want to talk about the market real quick. Permafrost is at an all-time low in quality right now, but it's still super cheap, so having a merchant, basically a 4-cost merchant that shuts down a lot of potential big units is really good, and that's why it's still here. It's just very efficient. Then we have the Force Evolution, because this card is super good and one of the go-to generic fetches for merchant, because you basically always want to see an evolution. Then Equivocate as the slower but more versatile tempo play removal. Then a Lightning Storm to make sure when you're a bit behind early on against the Torch or Purify against, say, token decks like Grenadins or Praxis tokens, this is a great way of catching up. It can also be a really good merchant fetch against fire-based aggro decks when they get the jump on you and get ahead by some cheap removal early on and a good curve to catch up from behind. And then last but not least, we have mirror image, since I wanted an actual unit-like threat in the market. I initially considered something like Rilgon or Shelterwing Rider, but I didn't like them too much, especially in this deck, because the deck doesn't need double Primal, and those were like the best Primal colored units to get, I felt like. So ultimately I decided mirror image is pretty nice because it's both a unit and a spell for some spell synergies that sometimes matter, and given that the merchant has Aegis, it's pretty likely to survive even if it's your only unit, so you can at least copy the merchant to make a second merchant and maybe also get like an evolution or a removal with the second merchant to cycle away some situationally useless cards. And it has been really great. Mouche has been also loving it, loving the edition and telling me how awesome it is to have in the market, basically. Okay, that's it for the deck list. The deck plays very flexible, very proactive, has a lot of burst potential, and you just want to try and raise as much as you can, get in damage to threaten lethal, so they have to make bad blocks against your tricks, or simply just die to your gift of battle bursts and your evolution flying and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm currently in the top 40 in ranked, and I'll take the deck to battle as usual to show you how to play it and how it does. So stay tuned for the first game coming up in a moment.